Hello everyone and welcome to the program. I'm Christiane Amanpour. And this week, something special. A few years ago, I had the rare opportunity to spend almost a year traveling the world to report a series that we called God's Warriors, illustrating in dramatic detail where religion and politics collide and sometimes explode to change the course of history. Each night this week, I'll bring you these reports on Islam, Judaism and Christianity, because much of what we discovered remains so vital to the challenges that our world faces today.
The scripture is the blueprint to life and living.
They are sure of their mission.
Our role is to redeem the entire world.
What they have in common:
God promised we would return to this land.
Jews, Christians and Muslims, the belief that modern society has lost its way.
They're raping virgin teenage America on the sidewalk, and everybody's walking by and acting like everything's okay.
The problem we have now with these civilizations is we don't offer the man where to go. He doesn't know his place in life.
The people that don't keep the Torah, they don't understand the meaning of being Jews, they wasting their life.
They say God is the answer.
I would like to see America become the nation under God again.
Tonight, God's Muslim warriors. Osama bin Laden is dead, and with him, the peak of violent jihad. Indeed, in the past 18 months, we've witnessed millions of Muslim citizens around the world reject the idea of bin Ladenism and instead rise up in mostly peaceful democratic revolutions against dictatorships. It's happened from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya and beyond. This is the Sunni part of the Muslim world. Syria, though, where the struggle for democracy continues, is tied to the Shiite part of the Muslim world, along with Iran and now Iraq. And a titanic struggle for supremacy between these two blocs is being played out in the region right now. To understand the stakes and the history, we want to take you inside both communities. First, I travel to Iran, the most powerful Shiite nation.
It's the holiest time of year for Shiite Muslims. On the streets of Tehran, grown men and women weep and pray. The city stopped dead in its tracks, from the main streets to the bazaars, as people across Iran relive the great religious dramas of their faith. I grew up in this country, and as a reporter, I come back, because it is here that 28 years ago, God's Muslim warriors rocked the world.
This is where America first tasted Islamic fundamentalism, when Islamic revolutionary students stormed the embassy and took American diplomats hostage for 444 days. And this set off a wave of Islamic fundamentalism throughout the Muslim world. What were the Iranians reacting against?
The Iranians were reacting against decades of Western interference. You can see this as Iran's declaration of independence.
The ruler of Iran, the Shah, had been restored to power in the 1950s in a CIA coup. He was rushing to modernize his country, like his father before him.
The Shahs in Iran used to make their soldiers go out with their bayonets at the ready, ripping off the women's veils and tearing them to pieces in front of them in the streets.
Mohammad Reza Shah ruthlessly crushed dissent and exiled mullahs who challenged him. The most prominent, a firebrand cleric named Ayatollah Khomeini, blasted back, calling the Shah the enemy of Islam.
He brought the whole of Iran out onto the streets by pointing out the injustice of the rule.
With Iran's constitution in one hand and the Quran in the other, Khomeini offered up Islam as the antidote to corruption and Western dominance of Iran.
And I think many of the Iranians saw it as a purifying ritual. Khomeini and the revolutionary mullahs were able to speak to Shiite traditions, not to Marxism or secularist ideals that had no grassroots among the ordinary people.
With Khomeini's revolution came the world's first modern theocracy, a fundamentalist Islamic republic that stood up to the United States and humiliated a superpower.
We felt very strongly for the independence of our country. We felt very strongly for the dignity of the Iranian people. We felt very strongly about the intervention of the American government in our affairs.
Masumeh Ebtekar would eventually become Iran's first female vice president, pushing for more democracy. But back in 1979, she was the voice of the revolution.
These people are spies working in the United States Embassy.
We were not terrorists, we were not militia, we had no training, no military training. This was a student movement, a genuine student movement. But they knew that they had to take some sort of unconventional step.
Unprecedented in the history of global diplomacy.
Exactly.
That unprecedented act was the takeover of the American embassy in the heart of Tehran. The relationship between Iran and the United States has never recovered. Night after night during the Holy Week of Ashura, religious drama lights up the somber streets and neighborhoods of Iran. Shiite believers, God's warriors, raise the battle standards of their greatest hero, the martyr of all martyrs, Imam Hussein. Faith, they say, bears aloft this massive weight.
It's not our biceps, it's our beliefs that gives us our strength. That and our love for Imam Hussein.
To understand just how much they love Imam Hussein, who was the Prophet Muhammad's grandson, spend some time at these rituals. For Shiites, about 1/10 of all Muslims, his story represents the eternal battle against oppression and injustice, and the willingness to sacrifice even one's own life for that struggle. Which is what Imam Hussein did in 680 AD. In a fight over who would succeed the Prophet Muhammad, Hussein and his entire family were slaughtered in a heroic last stand that would lead to the bloody Shiite-Sunni rift that continues to this day. This passion play is performed by an amateur troupe of bakers and builders, and it's directed by a bus driver, Yahya Ali Mirzai.
When I see this play, my heart breaks and I cry, because Imam Hussein has answered so many of my prayers.
This is a very emotional play. What is the reaction from the crowd?
The people watching are also talking to God. As they shed their tears, they confide their troubles and ask for help in their lives.
The story may have happened 1400 years ago, but on Ashura, emotions resurface as raw as if it were just yesterday. I sat in the women's section of the audience, next to Nasreen.
I love Imam Hussein and I would love him to visit my home because I've seen the miracles he's performed. One day I was penniless and I didn't know what to do. But after praying to Imam Hussein, I found 50,000 riyals in my drawer. I have seen many such miracles.
Nasreen and the other women can watch, but they can't be on stage.
That's because Islam bars women speaking publicly when young men are present.
But in the story, there were women. His family were killed.
But back then, how shall I say, young men were purer. Now we have to cast men to play the roles of women.
For instance, this mustachioed maiden. The drama, though, is not diminished.
It's more than 1,000 years ago since this happened. Is it still relevant to Iran today?
For us, it's still important. just like it was during the Iran-Iraq war, when young Iranians didn't hesitate to be martyrs.
Iran's 8-year war with Iraq is seen here as a triumph of faith. In 1980, Iraq's President Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. Hussein was supported by the Soviet Union and the United States. They saw him as a bulwark against the spread of Iranian-style Islamic revolution. The world assumed that Iraq's professional army would score a quick victory. But nobody reckoned with Ayatollah Khomeini's holy warriors. Waves of young boys who volunteered to become martyrs, clearing minefields by running across them. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. 8 blood-soaked years later, hundreds of thousands of young men and boys had been injured or killed, inspired to fight on by their first martyr, Imam Hussein. Back then, Amir Fakhr was one of Khomeini's holy warriors. Tonight, as he prepares free food for the Ashura crowds in Tehran, he tells us how he volunteered to fight when he was barely a teenager, seen here on a hilltop during the battle.
I was 13 when I went to the front.
You went to the war at 13 years old? How did they allow you to go at 13?
I did whatever I could. In the beginning, I was trained to defuse landmines, and when I was battle-hardened, I ran messages on foot.
Did you think of Imam Hussein when you were at the front?
He was my example. His courage inspired me. You can never praise him enough.
When the West looks at this and looks at the rituals, they see chest beating, they see back beating with chains. What message do you want the West to have about your religion, about your rituals?
When we beat ourselves with iron chains and damage our bodies, we want to show that we will stand with our Imam and our religion to the bitter end. For the Shiites, his sacrifice has kept Islam alive for 1400 years.
And it's alive today, not only in Amir's heart, but in his household. He's brought me to meet his family.
This is my son, Abbas, and this is Ali.
Amir's 2 little boys are named after his 2 brothers, who were killed in the war with Iraq, dying to defend their country. More than 20 years later, his mother doesn't regret the family's sacrifice.
Kubra, you're a mother, and you sent your 13-year-old son to the front. You lost already 2 sons. How could you have done that?
I never wept for my sons when they went to war. In fact, I was happy. I would have been angry if they refused to go.
Is religion that important in your life?
During the Ashura war, one of the Imam Hussein's disciples was decapitated, and his head was thrown at his mother. But she flung it back defiantly, saying, "Whatever I give to God, I don't want back." That's how important Islam is for us.
From the holy city of Rome, a grand Ayatollah tells us that martyrdom for your faith should never be confused with suicide terrorism.
The Western world, when they think of Muslims, they think of terrorists. So what is your answer to those people who say that they are God's warriors, that they're God's soldiers, that they kill in the name of God?
I've always said that terrorists should go to hell, and that is our belief. But if the enemy attacks us, we have the right to defend ourselves in any possible way.
Here we are.
Which is what Dawood Abdul Hadi did. Like his friend Amir, he was also a teen defending his country.
Do you really wish that you could have been martyred?
Yes, martyrdom was my biggest wish, but for me, it just wasn't meant to be.
Everybody understands that if your country is attacked, you'll defend it. But what I think many people don't understand is this love of martyrdom that exists in Islam, and particularly in Shiism. Why is it so important to die?
We love martyrdom because it leads us to heaven and because we'll be helped on the day of judgment.
Are you ready to fight again if you have to?
The true believers are still here. We don't ask for war. But if the enemy attacks even an inch of our territory, all Iranians, from children to old men, are ready to fight.
Tonight, Dawood sings in honor of Imam Hussein's martyrdom.
When we beat our chests, we feel light. We share the sufferings of Imam Hussein, and we tell the world that he is our master.
The most fervent Iranian believers still say that they would fight and die to defend their Islamic State. When we come back, we'll travel to the Sunni side. We'll see what bred the hatred that Osama bin Laden tried and failed to ride to victory.